So this is the second part of the side-by-side or double barrel inspection videos. So most of this inspection is going to come down to the barrels, but before getting there, the main things to really look for is firing pin protrusion. So if you can't push in on the manually, get a snap cap, put a little Sharpie on the back if it's been used, put it in there, see if she's hitting. Or if you can, if it's exposed, firing pins, these barrels off here. Take the barrel off or just break it down and then push in and see if there's any protrusion. If there's enough protrusion to hit the primary, you're all good. If they're broken or missing, you've got a pain to find them or get them made. However, if you get a mini lathe or something, it's not that difficult. So that's the main check there. Of course, check your bores for pitting or extensive pitting. That's your comfort level, what you feel like and how deep it seems. Of course, if there's rust right through it, then don't worry, then don't touch it. After that, you're going to want to check the gap between the barrels and the face up here. If there's any notable gap, she's walked out of headspace. Also, if you take the forestock off, give it a wiggle check. See if there's anything a little tiny bit, like on this. Isn't that big of a deal, but if you're getting quite a lot, anything more than that, avoid it. And I know there's going to be somebody to comment at some point, oh, we'll just take the barrel off, take a cross-peen hammer, and push this lug, the frontmost lug forward, which pushes the barrel back. It's like, I'm not going to recommend that. I have tried it. I've had 50-50. However, I don't do that anymore. It's just not worth the time because I ain't touching that stuff. Unless it's going to be for a purposeful wall hanger. The other things to check with the barrels off is, are both lugs there? Because I've seen enough of the oldies, especially pre-1900 ones, where one of these is missing. In which case you're going to know because you're pretty much going to break it down. The barrels are going to fall right out. But you kind of want them there. Also check to see if they've been re-welded or soldered or anything like that. They've been screwed with, essentially. Same with this front lug here for your forestock. See if that's been muddled with it all. If it's been reattached at some point, it's not a big deal if it works. And they haven't fuddled with anything with the solder, which is what I'm coming to next. So, with the barrels taken off, they have to be off. Grab it by the rear lug with one finger and dangle it. You can hold on to it, it's not that difficult. Take a knife, screwdriver, whatever. If you're using a knife, use a spine. And just tap it up and down. That is what it should sound like. It should sound like church bells. If it sounds something like this Wesley Richards, which is very nice, like the finish is good. That's another thing you can obviously are going to check or look if it's got an acceptable finish to your liking. But if you take this, which is very nice bluing, it's dull except for those two buzzing points. Solder's gone. Don't touch it. That's a full day's job, and most gunsmiths won't touch it. What that means is the solder, because it's dull, the solder's let go. When you hear buzzing, it means there's no solder and the ribbing's just doing that. That's why it's buzzing. So don't touch that. So you want it to ring. Even this really rusty one here. It's ringing, but it's buzzing, which means that it's starting to come apart, which makes sense considering the rust on it. However, it's still not as bad as that one. So that's you'll get some more shots out of it, but it's going to work itself apart within a few years, or within your lifetime at least. The other thing to check, if it's not a solid bottom like this Fox, and you got the 2 points where the lugs go through the frame, have they been muddled with? Are they still square? Is there any deformation? Has anybody been playing with them? That kind of a thing. It'll also tell you, especially if your barrels, like that aforementioned gap between the face and the barrels, if it's also a sign because the frame might be failing as far as headspace is concerned. This Wesley Richards, for example, there's gaps on the front side of it. This is all canted, and somebody beat on this with a hammer. So that's something to consider. The other thing to look at is the muzzle. Both of these tubes should be equal diameter all the way around. if they are not, so say if, and it's usually on the outside, that if it's very thin on the out and it looks fairly thick on the inner part of it, somebody's been sanding on it and has removed quite a bit of metal. I personally wouldn't touch one, but you do you. That also comes into play with the pitting, because if there's not a lot of metal because somebody's been sanding on it and she's pitted. The other thing to look for on the face, or sorry, not the face, the muzzle, is if it's dented. Dents can be worked out with a little bit of heat and a properly sized dowel. They can be worked out. However, that is a chore. Not exactly scientific. But check to see if she's dented. She might also be dented throughout the barrel. One here, one there from dropping or whatever is not that terrible. And like I said, can be worked out with a little patience, time, and definitely check out some other videos. But that's the other thing to look for, is if they're dented. Now, all these questions are very reasonable to ask a private seller. Hey, are there any dents in the barrel or at the muzzle? Could you ring the barrels and you can either explain how to do it or send them a video? Can you do these checks for me? And could you send some extra pictures? Very reasonable request. If they refuse to do it, there's something wrong. So something to consider there. Especially with the solder gun, that's the most expensive job outside of trying to find a new stock if your wood's failed. See the previous video. So those are the main things to really look for when going to think about buying a double barrel shotgun. This all also applies to over and unders. However, they are less frequent. Most of them are also, it's more of a newer thing, so they're not as usually walked out. However, it does apply because I've seen them with these lugs have been muddled with at some point, or they've been dropped because they were a hunting gun instead of a skeet gun. So you get into things like that, firing pins, all that. Once you get into Lockworks, if there's an issue with your Lockworks, say you're testing it or whatever and she's not holding cock, say on an exposed hammer, this is what you're dealing with for one type of them. Focus. So when you pull her back, there's your mainspring under tension, tumbler, and all that. And that's how you fire it. So you're getting into all these little moving parts, and these are all mostly handmade, hand-fitted, and some of these are different names. That's R. Hughes, Wesley Richards, Knickerbocker, stuff like that. If you notice, some of them also have entirely different mechanisms: coil springs, flat springs, multiple springs. You get into a huge variety. Newman Brothers, you're getting into a huge variety of stuff. So keep that in mind. I personally don't like exposed hammer guns that aren't in excellent condition because of the wood, typically. Because if you get the fingers coming down, and they all blow apart. Anywho, talking from more experience than examples, but hopefully this can give somebody an overview of what to look for, what to avoid, something like that. Hopefully save somebody some money, time, body parts, perhaps, eyesight, stuff like that. You can also look at things like your screws, see how muddled up the heads are. Somebody's been torquing on with the wrong type of screwdriver. They could strip the head out, and then you have no real easy way of repairing it, or you might have to find a specially threaded screw, something like that. Always use hollow ground screwdrivers when dealing with these, especially the thin tip ones are very handy, because once you get into bottom plates on the receivers, that's a solid frame. Especially with Belgian stuff, they come in they're extremely handy, and I can't say enough good about it. You just take normal hardware ones, which are tapered like this, versus hollow, which is that. You'll just strip the heads. So check your screws, see if somebody's been in there or tried to be in there. Most people have never been in them, so penetrating oil might be advised. And if you're going to clean the actions, barrels, whatever, and especially if you're not using for a while, please use a grease to prevent any excessive stock rot over extended periods of time. Also, it works very easily. So yeah, hopefully somebody that's English. Hopefully this has helped somebody, and have yourselves a good one.